if I was to ask you who you are, um, how would you answer me in a way that informs me about how you'd like me to know truly who you are?
Sure. I guess if I were to answer that question 5 years ago, I think it probably would have been with an emphasis on my identity. And I probably would have said something along the lines of like, I'm in my 20s and I am queer and I'm transgender and I'm a first generation immigrant and here are all my check boxes, on the form or whatever. But I guess at this point, none of that's really important to me anymore. It doesn't come up much unless I'm doing grant writing. I guess at this point in my life, who I am is a person just really interested in exploring and learning and developing friendships with as many people as I possibly can. I had kind of reached a point a couple years ago where I was really down and depressed and saw the world as a very bleak, kind of awful place where people do really terrible things to each other. And that it was feeling kind of hopeless and sad. And I was like, what really is the point of this? And then I guess kind of through this work, and I've been in a relationship now with my partner for 3 years who is ever the optimist and who shows me like the happy side of things and the silver lining to everything. And through that, I think it's just kind of showed me how to be the best version of myself that I possibly can. And that's in just showing love and kindness to as many people that I possibly can and bringing a little bit of that into their life in hopes that they'll spread that to others. And that will help, I guess, create a better positive world for us, even though there is so much darkness, especially this year. I think we've seen a lot of tragedy and suffering, and that's been brought to the forefront of our years. But I don't know. I guess at this point, I'm just sort of a person that's trying to find the silver linings and a lot of the darkness, and trying to make the world just a little bit happier for as many people as possible.
Welcome. Thanks for joining me on Interiors today. My name is Alexis Dixon. I want you to meet Casper Cendre. His soul lights the world. He is extraordinary. Casper Cendre is the director and co-founder of A.B.O Comix, a nonprofit small press that works to amplify the voices of LGBTQ prisoners through artistic expression. Through this work, Casper has published multiple books and graphic novels featuring comics, poetry, essays, and memoirs of currently incarcerated queer, transgender, and HIV-positive people across the United States. Casper maintains communication with hundreds of people in prison in an effort to uplift the voices of those who have been most abandoned by our society. His mission is to reduce the rates of recidivism in our society. Ladies and gentlemen, an extraordinary soul, Casper Cendre.
Started is that I was in contact with so many artists. I thought myself and a couple of friends thought it would be really cool to put together an anthology of comic art from some of our friends. So we asked like 5 of my pen pals on the inside who were artists if they would be interested in submitting artwork for a book. And they were so excited to do it that it made us think other people would be really excited to do it too. So we took out a call for submissions ad in the Black and Pink newspaper, which is an LGBT publication that circulates to thousands of prisoners nationwide. And we set up a P.O. box. And within a week, we were just flooded with mail. We had received like hundreds of letters of people saying they really wanted to do this project with us. And now it's 4 years later, and we've put out 4 anthologies. Each time it's gotten bigger. This year, it's featuring over 50 people. So it's like 370 pages, full color. It's huge. These last ones, I think, our third anthology was only like 190 pages, but for some reason this year, it's just blown up so much. The word of mouth in prisons, it's spread all over the place. So we receive like hundreds of letters a month from people. We are working on trying to hook up people with pen pals so that they have somebody to write with pretty constantly and have that level of support. And it's also just kind of grown from not just publishing people's stories, but doing kind of all the advocacy work we can do for people, including like filing grievances on their behalf, getting them medical visits and surgeries, trying to help people change policies at their prisons so that their prisons are safer if they're like transgender or queer folks. Doing legal work. I'm on the phone with wardens almost all day long, just trying to get help to some of our folks who have been, ignored or who have illnesses that are left untreated.
Yeah, what I got is how deeply personal this is for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I consider everybody that I write with to be my family. I write, I don't know, maybe anywhere between 50 and 100 letters to people a week. So people handwrite letters into us, or they send us emails if they have like kiosks and stuff inside their prisons. And so it's kind of been like forming a personal friendship with each person that writes with us over time. Many people have been writing to us since the very beginning, and our letters are not, they're not business related. They're not very professional. They're kind of like, people will tell me what's going on in their life and I'll tell them what's going on in my life. And then, we laugh and joke and send pictures back and forth. And it's really just like, I assume it's kind of like your podcast where I really just get to talk to people and learn about their life and their experiences, and do whatever I can to help. And then it's amazing because people come from so many different backgrounds and have such vast life experiences, and from all over the place. Like, we've got people who are in the military and people who are business owners and people who have had every sort of job imaginable. So they have like the best advice for me all the time about life and love and jobs and how to run a business, because I have no business experience. This is the first time I've ever tried to do something like this. So I learn something new every single day, and it's the best job I could have ever hoped for.
So what was the impetus for you starting this nonprofit, and what's the name of the nonprofit?
It's called A.B.O Comix. It was short for abolition, and it was kind of just a placeholder name for a little while until we could come up with something better, but we never did. So it's stuck. I guess, I don't know, it was just going to be, we were going to put together this one book. And that was kind of going to be the end all be all, because at the time I was working 3 other jobs and I didn't have a whole lot of time to dedicate to this, but I thought it would be a really cool project to do. And I fell in love with it. I had so many new pen pals and friends after doing this one book that I just didn't want to give up on it. So I quit one of my jobs and I dedicated a whole lot more time to this. So I would go to work for like 10 hours a day, then I'd come home and dedicate another like 6 or 7 hours to letter writing and publishing and stuff like that. And then it kept growing, and I was like, this is so much more fun than any job that I was working at the time, and it's so much more meaningful to me. So I quit all my other jobs and I just dumped my life savings into it. And now it's grown over the last 4 years. We've pulled in thousands of dollars worth of grants. Last year, I think we made like $50,000 in sales, and I don't know, it's so much fun and it's so meaningful. And I've developed such great relationships with people, and some of our contributors have gotten out of prison now and want to come work with us. And so I'm working on trying to get the funding so that we can hire people. It's just kind of opened my eyes up to how how much people really have to go through in prison. And you know, we think of prison as punitive for the most part. I don't see it really as rehabilitative, unfortunately. It's mostly like, you know, people are, they do something that causes harm to others, and then we put them in, you know, we lock them in a cage. Essentially, we lock human beings in a cage, and then we subject them to really horrible, inhumane, terrible things. And it doesn't help people heal or grow or find new routes to be the best version of themselves that they can be, if they're lucky enough to see the outside of their cage one day. So I think mostly our mission over time has now developed into making sure that folks not only survive while they're incarcerated, but that they learn to grow and thrive, and that they have opportunities once that we can welcome them back home, and that, you know, we don't continue to perpetuate this cycle of incarceration that's so prevalent in both our queer communities and our communities of color, and just really in the United States in general. Most people who are released from prison will go back to prison, and that's really unfortunate. And so that's something that, you know, I've loved dedicating my life to doing every day, is making sure that, like, folks know that they are remembered and celebrated and loved, and that they haven't, you know, they have people that have not given up on them in their life, and that they can come back and be part of our communities again. And that was a little bit of a rant, but
There's a power about you that's hard to miss. There's a power within you that, when you talk about darkness and the silver lining, finding the silver lining in the darkness, that takes a lot of courage and a lot of power and a will to not be consumed by the darkness, whatever that may mean, right? But there's a will and a power and a courage and an internal fortitude that resides within you.
thank you. That's very kind of you to say. It wasn't always there. I when I started, so I'm transgender, and when I started transitioning, I think it came from being in a really dark place and being very depressed, and only really seeing the darkness in the world. And it's just nice to not be in that spot anymore, and to have really incredible people in my life who love me and uplift me, and who share the best parts of the world every day. And it can get kind of frustrating only ever being a pessimist and only ever seeing the downside of things. So it's a huge relief to not be in that spot anymore.
It's like a rebirth.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually my my last name, Cendre. It comes from the French term for ash. That's actually why I picked it. I chose my name when I transitioned, and I thought of it kind of as like a phoenix rises from the ashes and is reborn. And that's sort of what my transition kind of felt like to me, is that I was feeling really uncomfortable in my own skin and in my own body and with my own personality and everything that I was as a person. I was feeling really just like, this is not right, and this is super uncomfortable, and I need to make a change. So then I tried to make that change, and every day since then it's been an uphill battle, but it's been a really good one, and it's been really good for self-growth. And so that's kind of how I see it. So it's funny that you say that.
This is an odd question, all right? It's a bit of an odd question I'm going to ask you. If you had a choice at birth to be queer or not to be queer, would you choose not to be queer, or would you choose to be queer, given everything you know now, given the darkness and the ups and downs and the whatever it is you had gone through, right, in life at 30? Would you still choose to be
Yeah.
queer, or would you choose not to be?
Absolutely. I wouldn't give it up for anything in the world. I wouldn't give my experiences up for anything in the world. I don't know who I would be at this point. I probably wouldn't be anywhere near as happy as I am if I had not had those experiences and figured them out and figured out who I needed to be and how to be the best version of myself. I think sometimes, you know, I like to think I'm not particularly religious. But I like to think that the universe isn't going to throw more at you than what you can reasonably overcome. And that's hard to say because the world throws horrific things at people all the time. And it can be really unfair, and it can be much harder for some people than it is for others. But I think we all have the capacity in us to be able to deal with things and find happiness even in really hard, dark, depressing times. And that's kind of with A.B.O Comix, that's something that I've learned kind of the hard way, is that I went into thinking when I was starting to write with people in prison that it was almost like I was doing charity work, I'm going to try and help people because they're in a worse spot than I am. But people ended up helping me much more than I think I've ever ended up helping them. And that's because all of the letters that I receive from people are full of like hope and joy and light and jokes and, people pulling funny little pranks on their cellmates and like keeping pets and making, recipes from gross commissary food that ends up being amazing that I've tried in my own kitchen now. And I'm like, this is the best thing ever. And people have like $3 to spend at commissary on disgusting junk food. But I guess, that revelation that like, no matter how dark people's circumstances are, they can always overcome and find something to be happy and grateful for. I think that's probably like one of the best things this work has done for me, is help me come to that realization that like, no matter how bad things get, there's always something to strive for. And there's always a light kind of at the end of the tunnel. And in that sense, I guess, like, I don't know, maybe you've had this conversation with Bert a little bit. He's now kind of exploring Christianity and exploring religion. And in some senses, that's kind of pushed me towards a little bit of more faith in something. I don't know what yet, but, in something.
What would you like people to know about A.B, your organization, A.B.O? What would you like them to know about it, and how can they support you in it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess what I want people to kind of know or familiarize themselves with a little bit more is what our justice system really is and really looks like for people, and how we think of justice in the United States and what that means for each one of us. Because as it is right now, if somebody does something that harms another person, then they go to trial and they're judged by their peers. And this is not in any way to make light of anybody's suffering, because some people in prison have done really horrible things to other people who now have to pick up the pieces and live with that and heal from that. And it's extremely hard. And on the other end of it is a person has made a mistake, sometimes a horrific mistake, and then is publicly shamed and put into a small confined box that they are not allowed to leave for however long their sentence is, and are left to just kind of dwell on those circumstances. And in most cases are malnourished. They only receive maybe one meal a day, and it's generally not the calorie count that is recommended for adults. So malnourishment is a huge thing in prisons. Temperature control is also a thing in prisons, where most prisons don't have air conditioning or heating. So it gets extremely, extremely hot in most places during the summer and extremely cold during the winter. And that's sort of something that people, I guess, subjected to like very intense climates throughout the year, which is not good for healing or being productive. And many people who have mental illnesses are subject to abuse, like they don't get the proper medication or proper dosage. If they're causing issues to like the correctional officers or anything like that, a lot of times they're thrown in isolation, where or if they express any sort of like suicidal tendencies, a lot of times they're stripped naked and thrown into a cold box, where they, are supposedly not able to harm themselves or others. We've seen really horrible instances of guards abusing, or sexually abusing the people that they have control over their lives. So I guess, not to say that everything about prison life is terrible and bleak, because that's not the case, but bad things really do happen to folks in prison, and that is not part of the sentence that we've imposed on people. And so maybe, I guess, something that I want people to really kind of learn about is how do we see justice, and is that justice, to impose suffering on people, instead of trying to help people realize maybe the mistakes that they've made in their life and how that's harmed people, and how they can kind of, how they, they can't always reconcile that. They can't always make amends to the person. They can't always take back the mistakes that they've made and make it better, but they can learn from it and can grow and do better in the future. And I think we've taken that away from so many people, because we just warehouse them in prison with no opportunities, no, education, no schooling, and oftentimes not even enough food or warmth, or even a little bit of human comfort or interaction to do much of anything except for suffer. And I don't think that that's justice. So I think that's kind of like what we're working on at A.B.O Comix, is just kind of bringing those things to light a little bit and making them more accessible to people so that they know what's going on here.
This has been a very wonderful journey. So this is kind of how the work goes.
That's great. I love it. Talking to you has definitely made my night, and I'm very much looking forward to getting to talk to you more.